Okay, Chris, so we've been doing this for a year now, and I'm happy to say that this is episode one of season two of the Decoded podcast, which means the summer school Decoded podcast stuff is over. I'm calling it. It's over. No more summer school. This is episode one, season two. What do you think?
I love it. Are we going to say, like, technically, I guess it's episode 48 in the larger volume, but do you want to flip? Like, now are we
Well,
on like
I've already given the title of this YouTube hangout. I've already called it season two, episode one.
so we're going to go 2.1? Are we okay?
Well, whatever you decide is best, let me know before I hit publish, because once it goes to iTunes, that's the title. So, I mean, we can call it whatever you want, like, so that it gets archived and published a certain way, but basically this is like season one episode. All those 47 episodes, they are now off living in a season one folder somewhere.
I'm okay with that. Yeah. No, season. Yeah, that works. That works.
Season two, episode one.
Yeah, season 2, episode 1.
I feel like I just extinguished some kind of happiness that you were enjoying about 15 seconds ago.
No, you know what it was? It's actually more, I gotta be honest, it's more the ridiculousness of the little drawings that I do on the paper here, because you sort of that idea of having something that goes, and this is completely on point to where we stopped the on ramp. The thing I want to say, the idea that I had in my head that I wanted to put down, that kind of encapsulated the episode. And you've said before, like, that you appreciate the simplicity of some of the drawings that I do here. When I kind of commit to the picture, the thing that I want to put down, that's kind of like we talked about this for 15, 20 minutes. I got it in my head, one thing, something to do with the number 48. Oh. And then you introduced the idea, well, now we're in season 2, episode 1, and right away there's that dissonance. How do I hold on to my old idea? Do I flip over and just use your idea, or is there a middle ground? So that's probably where I am right now. I'm in that middle ground. And
if it makes you feel any better, just do what you want. Because it's not, I mean, this is cool. I like this dissonance. You draw your picture the way you want to draw your picture, and then, like, maybe for you today, season 2, episode 1 is a side note. Maybe that gets this much space at the bottom of your picture, and the rest of your picture is episode 48. Because really, if we stop and think about it, episode 48 is the same as season 2, episode 1. So how you want to frame that is up to you. This is so cool. You know what? I'm going to make a connection to my work. This reminds me of when I talk to my students, when I will be talking to my students about numbers, and how numbers can look. One number can look a different way and can be referred to in different ways, but it's always going to be that number. So the number 7, you can show the number 7 in a number of different ways. You can write out the word 7. You can draw 7 circles in a space. You can symbolize that number in a number of different ways. And so I think we're doing the same thing here. This episode is happening right now. You and I are talking. I'm choosing to call it season 2, episode 1, just because I'm connecting it to when we started last year and how we started last year. And I'm kind of celebrating that holy cow, like, we've done a whole volume of podcasts, and you came into it with this idea about 48. So I'm like, my response to you is just roll with what you want to roll with, and I'll roll with what we want to roll with. But at the end of the day, we're both on the same page. So I mean, the dissonance is good because it gets you thinking, but you're already a thinker. So go nuts with your 48. You know what I'm saying?
Which brings me to the brain lockup that we were chatting yesterday, because the videos that we've been messing with for the binary code entries. And you know, in the process of, I realized, let me put it this way. Are you aware of your creative process? Are you like when you're going into your creative process, when you're being betrayed by your creative process, when you are, let's say, being throttled by it, like you just feel like you're being dragged along by it versus you kind of riding it out. I was, there's some, oh, is it in one of the books you and I are reading? I don't know if it was the Fire book or the Originals book, or it could be somewhere else. Two books that I flowed through this summer. I think you went through the, I'm already forgetting the name, not Catching Fire. What was the Fire book that we were reading?
Fire?
What's that?
Facing Fire?
Playing with Fire? Jeez.
Something Fire.
Something Fire. Okay, so one of it's in reference to the creative process, and there was an artist that I think it was a poet, and maybe Sylvia Plath. I don't remember the exact artist, but the artist spoke of creativity like this: that there was a sense of an oncoming storm, and you're standing out there in some sort of a wide open field, and the only way that you could sort of harness the energy of that storm, that thing that's sort of coming at you and speaking to you, like you feel a little bit of the breeze through the grasses and you can hear the rumbling out there, is you running, well, in this particular case, the artist running back to their typewriter because they wanted to make sure that they were right there with their tools when that creative kind of voice came to them, so they could just drop it right into, onto the page. And if you weren't there ready to go, it would just pass right on by. Now, the thing is, and here's what you have to imagine, is that let's say you don't make it back to your computer, or you don't make it back to your mobile device, or you don't make it back to your markers or your pad of paper. If you don't make it back to it, that idea passes on to somebody else. And you start to kind of look at the creative process of something like as a living process. It's not as static as, I have this sudden inspiration and it's only mine. The risk is that I didn't notice that inspiration and it passes on to another person, and then they get a chance to kind of go at it, right? It may come back around, but the assumption is this is your opportunity. And I really appreciate that story as far as creative process, because I think that is me, that in a lot of ways. Like, I will get an idea, and if I don't action it, then I rarely ever find them again. I don't. It's if I sort of get into my mind that I want to. Now, this could entirely be connected with my adult ADHD. I mean, there could be something there, like just kind of focus on the task, try to get it done, because the essential elements might disappear really quick. But I think there's also a really cool bit of activation that happens when I might be thinking about, well, I'll give a firm example. So yesterday, trying to figure out how I'm going to do new lesson designs for the ASD program that I'm a part of. And I was just doing this. My brain was just hitting, like I was forcing inspiration to happen. And inspiration is just like, like it's not connecting. It's just dancing. It's dancing with me. And all that energy that I put in there, all of a sudden I had this idea about what I wanted to do with one of my other courses. So one of the things I know about my creative process is not to force it just to completion. I have to come back to it. So then I end up spending time working on something else. And it was a grade 12 learning strategies course. And then all that, it's funny, deep muscle relaxation, is that it? DMR? And then you do that and you can feel like just spots kind of opening up. That's almost exactly what happened with me trying to push through to create activities for the ASD program. I was so locked up on it. And as soon as I had, it's like something just kind of squeezed out the side of it. Like there was so much pressure there, it squeezed out the side of it. And when I paid attention to what was coming out the side, it was an idea for my other lessons. So I just pivoted and walked away from it in the other direction. And what was really fascinating about that was then you and I were having a conversation via text around you were working through your binary code drop that you wanted to put down. And then our conversation this morning, you finding that angle, just that way to get in there. And I shared, kind of like my process. Like I'll try 2 or 3 times to make something work. And then I walk away. I was observing my own process. I walk away from it. That would be, and I have to say, that's probably me in life. I got to be honest. It's probably has to do with professional relationships. It has to do with cooking. It has to do with the trying a new activity. Like I come at it a few times and then I walk away. And then I think to myself, okay, I've had my downtime, whatever that is. Go back at it again with a different mind. Because inevitably, what I've done here to try and make this idea work and then kind of like scooted and gone and done something else, I could hit that over here. So even my new creative thing that I want to go to, there's no assurance that I'm going to be able to like flow really easily with it, right? It might not. That's my big Sunday morning thought. It may be of interest to people that are going back on Tuesday, because there's going to be a whole lot that we're going to feel like, I think we're doing this. Like it's just got to get done. It's got to get done in that way. It's got to get done in this time frame. And then all of a sudden it's 3:15 and the day's done. You got to clock out. You have to come back at it, the next day. And you might not even be going back at this one. You might be going at, this one over here. Like you don't even get back to this idea that's here right away. That's just how the school week can go. So
I didn't know that you were going to take it there. I didn't know that we were going to talk about creative process.
I don't think we ever have. I don't think we've ever examined.
Sometimes I feel that because my creative process, I try to lay it out. I try to lay out my vision. I don't see it as a creative process because I feel like laying it out and blocking it up in front of you takes the creativity out of it. But I'm not seeing it that way anymore. It's because sometimes, so when you and I were discussing over text yesterday, we were talking back and forth about the video you had made, the video that I was trying to make. And when I say trying, it's because I kept hitting a wall. What I had envisioned wasn't coming to life. And at one point I decided that, so my vision started in my mind, then I mapped it out. If you imagine, I didn't actually draw it out or write it out in front of me, but I took my vision from my mind, I laid it out so that I knew, okay, here are the steps to making this video that I can see in my mind. Now let's get to work, right? Let's start to execute some of these ideas and, place action on them so that they happen. And when I got stuck, I walked away, kind of like you. I was like, okay, well, I'm not doing this now because it's not working. Then when I came back to it, it's almost like the blocks in front of me, it's almost like I took 3 or 4 of them and just tossed them out of the equation and left space for anything to be placed there with the other blocks. You get what I'm saying? So like, it's almost like I try to get all the pieces of my puzzle and I put them in front of me. And I know what the puzzle is supposed to look like. And now I just need to put the pieces together. And yesterday I took 8 to 10 pieces and I just literally tossed them away. I'm like, I don't want these pieces in my puzzle anymore. And now my puzzle, if I would look at it with those pieces missing, my brain would say that it's incomplete. But then I reserve space in my mind. I reserve space in my mind for the openness and the flexibility so that I now get to insert whatever I want where those pieces would go. And here's the trick. In the end, the puzzle's always going to look the way it's supposed to look because it's my puzzle. So at that moment in time, when I'm taking pieces away and tossing them and saying this doesn't work with what I want anymore, or I can't make it happen right now, I got to get rid of it, or else I'm never going to do this. I'm never going to get this done. I'm just changing the puzzle. I've got a new picture in my mind. And sometimes when I'm really feeling good about an idea, I don't have time to put the blocks in front of me, so I just grab the video. I just talk into the camera, or I capture clips that I feel I can mess with later on. And then when I have the time, I go back, and that's where something comes from everything that I've collected. So I don't have one standard way. Like, as I didn't know we were going to talk about this, but as we're talking about it, I don't have one standard way. Every video I've made so far for the binary code has come from a different angle, either from like something you did that pushed me to try something new, or just a different idea about how I want to start it or how I want to end it, what I like and what I don't like, music, no music. Like, I just feel like I'm still in the experimental stage, and I'm really enjoying it because it's fresh. And at the end of the day, I have an artifact. We have an artifact because it's living on the DeCodEd site. We have an artifact that we can refer to, or we can use for something else. Like, it's funny, I already have an idea of a video I would like to create using videos that I've already created. Like, so I'm already looking, how can I recycle, how can I use some of the things I've done to create something new down the road. It's just there, and I find it really it's really enjoyable. And it got me thinking about, this is kind of weird but kind of cool at the same time. I was on Instagram yesterday, and I was looking at some of my buddies' pictures, and in one of the pictures he connects to another person. So then I went to their page to see what they're all about, and basically they're a university student, and they're studying film studies and like make video media type stuff. And for the first time ever, I looked at that and I thought, oh my God, that person is studying my side hustle. What I like to do with my students on the side, by making videos to help us with our learning, to demonstrate our learning, this thing that I'm doing with you with the DeCodEd podcast. If you would have told me before I did any of this, if you would have told me you were going to college or university to study film and how to make videos and leverage YouTube and Vimeo and stuff like that, I would have been like, wow, you're a loser. Like, what are you doing with your life? You're throwing your life away. You can't work like that. Now I see that and I'm envious. I'm like, imagine the joy that I get from the little bits of things that I do with it. Imagine if that was my work. Imagine if that was my life's passion. Talk about executing something every day as a career that you truly love. So I got this new perspective, just playing around. Like, I don't even have the bells and whistles. I have the phone. I have like a stand with really cool legs that twist and turn so they can adapt, and I can place it wherever I want. I have a microphone, and that little rig of mine brings me so much joy. So anyway, the creative process, I think I've mentioned this to you before, is that I've never really I never considered myself a creative person. And I don't know why I've put those blocks in my mind, because I've done some things I've done lots of creative things. So why is it that I won't acknowledge that? I don't know. But see, I can hold that thought on one side. I don't know why I do that to myself, but on the other side, I can see my creativity. I can see that I can be creative. I have been creative. I will continue to be creative. And I think what's blocking those two from harmonizing is the definition I have in my mind of what creativity is. And basically looking at other people's creativity and being in awe of the work that they do. And then maybe thinking that my work doesn't compare, therefore I am not. But as I grow older and hopefully a little bit wiser, I recognize that I need to take from those things positive stuff that I can meld into what I do, and try to put aside that judgment of, well, oh my God, look at that work. I can't do that work, therefore I'm no good. So rather than bringing myself down, I should be looking to take best practice from people and try to incorporate into mine and just move on in a happy way, you know? So I go ahead, Chris, because if you don't say something, I'm going to go on again.
No, it's funny because the whole, I think about, you make me think about the creative, so being creative as a teacher. And did you see the tweet? I don't know if I forwarded to you. I pushed it out about who dropped is it New York Times, Edutopia? Someone dropped that. It felt a little bit like an expose, but there's an article floating around right now in the EDU Twitterverse around teachers paying teachers. I think Doug Robertson had a commentary on it. It's go ahead. What were you gonna say?
Doug said something about it, and now other people have jumped on board.
Sorry, Doug,
and
did I say Doug Robertson?
Sorry,
Doug Robertson.
You said Doug,
yeah,
and then my brain decided to call it Peterson, but you're right.
Yeah,
it was Doug Robertson.
We got two Dougs there. Yeah. So it was Doug Robertson. I mean, I think I had read it a couple of days before, but it's the article in itself just speaks to teachers of Instagram. I think it speaks to the socioeconomic reality of being a teacher in the United States. I think there's a lot of different pieces in about being a brand ambassador, I forget what they called it. Was it a spawn com or con? They talked about teachers that will actually product drop. So they make sure that in the pictures they take of their classroom, they're sort of focusing in on the Microsoft keyboards, or they're focusing in on a particular marker, and then they tag or connect those to the companies, and there's a sponsorship deal. So you're making your product placing in your own classroom. And it's very much, I took it as a very much American kind of mentality. I don't know. I just don't know if that happens as much in Canada, or even down to our context in Ontario, where teachers are actively being sponsored by wooed and sponsored. I think that some of the individuals that are repping products hard probably get some sort of a kickback, if not, swag or free subscriptions, stuff like that. I think that stuff does happen in our context in Ontario, but to actually get paid, and then also, let's say, to be paid by other teachers because they want to buy your stuff and replicate what you have. So that's the article that's floating around out there. My question is more around how that intersects with being creative in your own way and finding your own way to kind of deliver imaginative, personalized approaches to working with your students. So what's it, last week you were talking about how, bulletin boards are a little bit of your kryptonite. I realized this week that's the same for me. I'm not a bulletin board guy. And you may have become one, but you're articulating that you just, to sort of look at that bulletin board and see the potential, to actualize it, that's difficult for me. That would be an example where someone might say, well, I'm going to go to one of these paid teacher sites and see what they've done on their bulletin board. Now, there's an interesting fine line here, because mentorship is all about, it's two-way. You sort of look at what somebody else is doing, and then you decide you might do replication of it. You might do an adaptation of it. You might just use it as inspiration for your thing, right? You just need something to kind of bump you and go. But I think about these teacher Instagrammers, and I wonder to myself about the impact on the creativity of being a teacher and taking a chance on something, designing it, and kind of planting it and see what crop you kind of reap from it. Because if it is that easy to sort of just, take a snap, try and replicate, go and get the stuff, I wonder about the sort of homogeneousness of what classrooms can look like, because we're constantly kind of just only copying from what we see in the classroom next door or in the digital classroom next door. I would say that on the other side, I'm impacted by that as well, looking at my two colleagues' classrooms, and there's something in me that says, I want my classroom. It's a funny process. Somehow I look at their space and I think to myself, that looks like a finished classroom, which automatically triggers a little bit of inadequacy in my space, saying my classroom needs to look like that. And then I tease it apart and I say, you know, even though I want it to look like that, I don't like the color scheme that I'm looking at. I don't like that font. Like I start to have these I start to have these thoughts that I don't acknowledge as part of my creative process. I sort of put it in a framework that I'm complaining, or I'm not thankful enough for being helped out. But I think for me, where I got to go is I got to start paying attention to that. That's my creative process giving me clues about what I should do next. Now, the work is the work. The grind is the grind. Taking your work home and doing it outside of class time, that's probably part of the suffering too. But I do stop for a moment and think to myself that if I'm willing to go and directly copy what I see or to buy and download, I almost feel as if I'm not listening to my creative process enough. And I wonder about if for other people, I wonder if for other teachers, if that's something that happens as you, is this a, you know, as you become deeper in your teaching, that you don't listen to that voice quite as much as you become, you sort of assume mastery over what you're doing, and maybe you don't change as much. You're not as comfortable with the kind of itchy sweater that can create by being creative on your own. Where I started with this is all this kind of dissonance when I was trying to get something done pushed out and made me consider what I needed to create in another space. And along the way, you kind of popped up with your idea too. But I wonder about that. The digital sphere, is it making people, how effective is it in making people creative? Yeah.
I think it depends on your perspective. I really do. See, I enjoy it because I get a lot of ideas that I wouldn't normally get. Because for me, the way I think about it is, I'm in a school with a finite number of classrooms, but digitally, there's an infinite number of places to find ideas to help me become more creative, or ideas that allow me to process something that I wouldn't have processed before. So I kind of like that. When you were talking about mastery, I was thinking about fluency. I don't think I've mastered anything. I think I've just become really fluent in particular things, and that fluency, I think, allows me to still be open to learning about how to be better in that particular area. So I'll give you an example. At my new school, people are already calling me the techie. They're like, oh, we've heard of you. You're the techie. I need your help. I can't figure this out, and I know you're a techie. So I have a fluency around technology. I'm comfortable with it. I feel like a lot of the questions that people ask me about or need a little bit of assistance with, I'm good with that. I know how to do those things very easily. So I have a fluency. I wouldn't call myself a master, because in my mind, and I don't know why, in my mind, a master is somebody that has arrived somewhere and isn't closed to learning new things, just isn't bumping into new things. The same stuff keeps rolling around, getting recycled in their head. And so they're the master because they've attained this level that nobody else has attained, or very few people. And so then when I shift and I think of being fluent in something, even the word fluency reminds me of like fluidity, which means that there's room to move, which means that things are flexible in my mind. And so being fluent at something provides you with a high level of understanding, maybe because you've cycled through things a bunch of times, but it also leaves room to be flexible and to continue to grow in your understanding of a concept, or in your in how much more fluent you can become. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I think the old way, when I say old way, I mean like society 1.0. I think mastery is like was a big deal, and I think it's probably lost some of its power because of the way the world is now. Like, I don't need to talk to you to learn something about a particular concept. The internet is wide open. This being connected globally in a digital way means that I can get to almost anything I want on my time, on my terms. Now, maybe the best thing is that I connect with you face to face because your name keeps popping up in my journey for learning, but it doesn't mean I get to start with you. I can end with you. I can ignore you completely. I can talk to people who have studied under you. I think that in the olden days, that was less likely to happen. But now with this freedom that we have and with this access that we have, how much does your mastery really mean to anybody else? I noticed that you wanted to jump in a couple of times. So,
well, it's funny because I think so here's, I'll give you the random thoughts. Okay, so a couple different things. Would our weekly meeting sound and look any different if we had zero contact on the week? Don't chase each other.
Sorry, I missed the last part.
If you and I go zero contact next week, zero contact, where we don't message each other, we don't share directly with each other, and then we meet next Saturday or Saturday or Sunday and have our conversation, would our individual experiences somehow have a more profound, not profound, would they seem more genuine in some way? So we wouldn't have that frequent contact. Because I think that's, and I'm using a small scale example here, when we're going out and you say, you can go out there and find whatever you want from the internet or digital resources. It's the how do you know what you want question that I like to spend some time on. Because the idea that, and of, thinking about the creative process, and you have, whether or not you have sort of like research or inspiration or deep thinking as kind of like your first step in your creative process, whatever that, the spark, if you want to call it that, what sparks it, I think, is critical. And I think it changes how you deal with the rest of the creative process. So if you're completely sparked up because of, I don't know, an apple that you're eating in front of you, I think that creates a very different, for me, it creates a very different energy than me watching a video about someone eating an apple. The layers of experience that I have direct access to as I'm becoming creative set the direction that I move forward in. I think this is, what's fundamentally changes the ideas that I get addicted to, that I want to complete, that I want to get beat up by to a degree, the ones that I find myself sitting in the middle of, as opposed to reading on somebody else's timeline or having sent to me. For example, any of the little bits of life lessons that you or I have kind of sent back and forth by a new, a theorist or somebody that's agitating out there. The only time I spend time with it is if I myself are going through something that it speaks to. Now, this might be really, really obvious. I still appreciate every single time you share something with me, But unless I have a place in that moment for it to kind of land on, the experience of what I feel you're saying is thinner. I just don't, and I might, it goes along in the timeline and I kind of take it as part of our conversation, but it loses the sort of its potential energy to motivate me to do something, just kind of, it falls. And I there are similarities in, you know, yours and my mindset and the things that we go through. And it's funny, we are in sync. Sometimes you'll send me something like, oh man, I was just kind of like thinking that thing. There's other times where you send something and I think to myself, that might be it. I can appreciate it. That's entirely his context. And I do appreciate the share, but I kind of just file folder it away for another time. I think that idea with in reference to what inspires me is that I really do have to be in the middle of it. And what I want to do, it's funny. It doesn't, when there's something, if I were to say there's something that I want to do, at least I'm convinced that I thought of it. And I'm not usually convinced that I thought of it. And it doesn't have persuasive hold over me to make change and to do different things and to sort of be brave unless I somehow thought that I thought of it first. And this is where I'm sort of playing outwardly to sort of Twitter feeds and Instagram and all that. And I think that part of, and this might have been part of my social experiment, my sort of meditative move to move away from Twitter for a little while, was a way to see a clear distance or difference between what I'm actually doing in my own creative process versus what my feeds are kind of suggesting. And so when I go back to what I was originally starting, I wonder if there would be any difference to the flow in our sort of weekly meeting if we didn't share anything. And again, I don't mean that in any sort of a lockdown thinking. Collaborative pieces are awesome. But being able to sort of say, being able to speak to something because you had to sit with it and tease it out and work through it. Now the risk is maybe we have a 3-hour podcast, but it ends up being too long, right? Because admittedly, a big part of our podcast is that we're kind of already in the know by Saturday or Sunday. Right? We're kind of informed. We've done the research on each other to kind of, it's been shared. But yeah, that's what it made me think about. My motivation to do something, to execute. I have to be convinced or completely blind in a certain way that I thought of it. Like has to be on the inside. There's a funny analogy here for teaching too, right? The students that you're trying to sort of work with, somehow getting in their head, making it think like they thought of it first. I don't know why it's just occurring to me in such a profound way now, but yeah. And I think in that's where I start to believe that I'm creative. In that moment where I think I've thought of it first. And I can find it in other spaces after that. But my process, that inspiration, I guess, is the first step of creative process. I somehow have to feel like I am the originator, even for a moment, even for a second. And that energy feels totally different than if I look online and I watch a TED Talk and I feel like that person is speaking to something that's inside of me. It's almost like, why didn't I say that first? Why didn't I put my words out? They are totally speaking my language.
I've been feeling that a lot lately. The why didn't I say this first? Because I think I commented to you somewhere along the way. I probably sent you a tweet or several tweets saying, actually, I've tweeted a couple times about this in general. Where are we at where common sense tweets are like being loved and retweeted 8 million times? Like, what does that say about where we're at? I'll read something that somebody tweets and I'm like, I was thinking the same thing. I just didn't tweet it out. And does it matter who said it first? Not really, but it's just one of these things where it's like, I just feel like there's so much out there that's what I would consider normal. And I think the new cool thing is to tweet the normal and not necessarily tweet, but like what I'm referring to is people putting regular ideas out there to the masses, and then the masses are like, oh yeah, this is the best. And it's like, this is the best. You're already doing this. Just somebody reminded you or made you bring it to awareness. Like that, I think that's the new flavor right now, is that let's bring the normal back to awareness. So it's, you know, front end, right there at the front of your head, instead of at the back of your head or just floating around in your file cabinet of your brain. It kind of annoys me in a way, and it doesn't annoy me in another way, but you've got me thinking about our back and forth during the week and how that impacts what we do here on the podcast. I think it obviously does play some kind of role, that's for sure. But then at the same time, you can't tease out the fact that we're now friends, and friends are going to talk because people talk to their friends. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, yeah, Chris is my friend, but I don't talk to him all week because I talk to him on Saturday or Sunday morning for an hour. And we need to make that a really authentic hour. So we're just not going to communicate with each other about anything because we do this thing called a podcast on Saturday mornings.
Right.
Like that's well, when I say it like that, it's absolutely ridiculous that we wouldn't communicate because we want to see what it does to the Saturday podcast. You know,
and it's funny because I'm not. It's just, I guess more. I can't. Neither can I. I can't separate our relationship from our process. I can't. I think that there's something synergistic. We proved it this past week in kind of posting some of our videos without. You know, it was funny. There was one that I was in process of, and you said it was done, and I didn't look yet. I wanted to get my idea. It's a little bit of that. Who's going to be the first to post? It's funny, and I'm not trying to make it competitive. I just knew that my idea, it was so close to being shaped that I wanted to see it end to end. So it popped up in my feed somewhere. I'm like, yeah, I just want to complete it. And then when I had a look, I'm like, oh, holy crap, that's funny. Like there is connection here. And I'm not suggesting, you know, that we would necessarily be better. I'm just wondering about the difference. And I guess I broaden it out into larger groups. I think about it in our, you know, in connection with our families, in connection with our students, our colleagues. Having that distance, does it make us reach for creativity a little bit more? Like, is there something that compels you to kind of, you know, when you feel like you're just a little bit of that castaway, to sort of dig into your own resources before you take a peek at anybody else's too quickly? That's what it made me think about.
That's funny because I think you've been the one posting first, which is fine. Like I don't have that. There's nothing there pushing me to post first. What I have is, and what I'm really appreciative of, is the fact that your videos have been quite different than mine in terms of content. And so I think that that's awesome because now there's two individuals who are posting on this in the same place, and we're providing variety for people, right? So if we are both posting the same kind of thing all the time, there's no variety there. It's just like, oh, there's just like the same message over and over again, but it's not. And I like that. And you're going to be you and I'm going to be me. And I'm totally fine with that. And I think you're fine with that too. Now, the good thing about having watched your video first, this last posting that we both did, is that you were watching your video was able to help me with my being stuck in the creative process. So it's not like I took your content and I did the same thing. It's your content provided me with a way to bust through my barriers. And I think that's important. So had I left your video alone and said to myself, I'm not watching it until I post mine, that would have been a huge mistake this time around, because your video and other people's videos, not just you, other people's videos give me more. They give me something to think about. They help me. They either put up barriers but most of the time they help me break them down. So I think it's cool that our last videos were kind of there was a string between them in a weird kind of way, but they're also very different.
Yeah, I think I do have space, definitely space in my process for inspiration. And even as as I hear you sort of work through the idea, I realize that it's that at some point in the production stage, or the let's say the tail end of that loop of creativity, the idea is really fragile. It's almost like you have this sense of, because I've spent this amount of time working on it, I gotta deliver it. And I guess you challenge my thinking that what makes it fragile probably is the fact that you close off influence from the outside. And truth be told, you can only spend so much time designing a lesson. You can only spend so much time organizing your room. You can only spend so much time hashing out a new, let's say, mathematics or literacy initiative. It has to hit the road and start to be used. And when the minds close up and say, no, we need to spend more time consulting, we need to spend more time thinking and planning and plotting, well, unless you sort of get it out into prototype where people can start messing with it, that group think of we're doing the right thing is dangerous. Now, I'll take it back to the small scale of the videos. I think that probably, I guess even I'm almost countering what I'm thinking there. Like, I probably could or should take a peek if you post first. And it's not, I realize in saying it almost had sort of like a competitive element to it. Like, I need to have it. I don't need to, it's more, I guess what it comes down to is I need to have my arc, my story completed. It's less about posting it for anybody else to sort of see. And I do believe that if I were to share the link with you, you would choose whether or not you would actually look at it or not. You would sort of decide your process, whether or not you want to see it. It is funny for me. I find that when the way I task myself is that when I get immersed in something and someone says, hey, are you going to sort of like, have you taken this into account? I tend to like to close the loop and finish what I'm doing, and then send it out in the bottle and see what happens, and then take into account whatever someone said kind of for the next time, for that next iteration that I'm going to do. But wanting to take the risk on what it looks like outside my head is probably a high motivator for me. Can I make this thing that I've imagined manifest? Can I make it look as intriguing or interesting outside my head as it was inside my head?
Interesting.
Competition with self.
Very interesting. Yeah. The best kind sometimes, right?
Yeah. I think it's one of those maybe underappreciated. I think it's one of the underappreciated elements of sharing as a teacher in the Twitterverse, is that no matter what you're sort of pulling from your inspiration on the internet, is that the true competition really is with yourself, not somebody else's classroom or somebody else's ideas. And if you can include that in your process, I believe the payoff is higher, really high. I used to love, I remember when sketchnoting was a thing.
Yes.
I don't know if it's still a trend. I think
it is.
Is it as I'm doodling down in front of me? So I remember when sketchnoting was a thing, and I can remember there was a string of conversation that happened. I was a part of it. I was a part of different elements of it, but that whole idea where Sylvia Duckworth kind of became the focus of a lot of sketchnoting. She kind of broke ground on it quick in Ontario, right?
She ended up writing a book too.
Yeah. So yeah, she dropped the book on the process. And it was funny. There was a whole period there where I know for myself, I'd be showing up at professional development spaces and they would have her slides up. And she was always very clear. She cited her information from a presentation or whatever. But sometimes people weren't as kind in their citation of her work, which also cited somebody else. And, there was a time there where I was caught, connecting with her and talking and saying, you know what, I this may come back, but I corrected somebody. I sort of mentioned it to them in one of their slides. I'm like, you should refer that back to Sylvia. Like that's her work there. And they were quick to kind of mention, well, it's actually the other person's work. I'm like, yeah, but the creative piece in between, the words that were said and her sort of pictures and then your presentation, that's some shaky bricks. Like you need to put some glue between them to make sure that everyone is acknowledged in here. And I think about that idea of when we're inspired by things that we see online, for me, they become kind of snapshotty things, and I'm not as clear. Like, I have to be honest, I don't like citation. Not that I don't like citation. I don't like to be in the position of citation because there's something where I want to drive to kind of be the source. Like I really do. I want to have that suffering to sort of create that thing, good or bad. It's funny. I find that I think it's probably part of the reason that I've never thought to move forward doing a master's, because I think if I ever had to do a paper that big and to have that much annotation of other people's thoughts, it makes me wonder about, have I lived enough? Have I done enough myself? Is that weird? Does that make sense? Like you're sort of writing about a topic that you have to sort of speak to. I feel like I'm on other people's coattails. I think that's why I like what you and I are doing here. I think this is why I like doing the podcast myself. I think that's why I like posting the little videos, because I like taking a chance on sort of putting something out there that I think is authentic for me. And that's a really tricky thing sometimes to do in EDU, like, because we're constantly reusing other people's stuff. As our students too. You got a good laugh. What are you thinking?
I'm laughing at the master's thing. You doing a graduate degree and just dying the whole time that you have to like go out and search information that other people came up with or piggybacked on or whatever. And it's funny because that's what, I mean, in excuse me, in that you end up creating something. So there's something about the way you said it that was just so black and white, but really we all know it's not black and white, and you're certainly not black and white. You're not that type of person, or at least I've not seen that type from you. But I think what happens, Chris, is that the best things that can happen is that we end up creating something new based on other people's work. So for example, you're fully aware of Sylvia Duckworth and her work, and you kind of put together a sketch note you do put together a sketch note after every episode, but it's yours. It's your work. I mean, maybe you picked up a couple of things from Sylvia here and there about technique, style, process. I don't know. But at the end of the day, it's your work. And I get what you're saying about like creating something new. And there are people who spend their whole life doing that. There are people who spend their life thinking about new things and then bringing them to light. I think that's the 2% of the world, just like any other expertise, right? It's not the general population. So I think if you want to do a master's, you should, number one. Number two is I think that in education, because we're limited by time is limitation, right? With everything we do. And I think that if you're in search of something original and fresh and new as a teacher, it's going to take up a lot of your time. And then what's that going to look like for you as a teacher if you're always trying to do your own thing? I mean, the wheel, when you start to reinvent the wheel, then you start to waste your time. So I think there's a balance there, because you need that time to get things done. If you're always trying to create something new, you're wasting time that is not really yours. I mean, you have a finite amount of time with these kids. So you just have me thinking in circles right now about that. But there's so much going on there. I want to humble brag though for a second. before Sylvia really exploded onto the scene, I politely asked her if she could sketch note a blog post that I had written, and she did. So I wrote a post, and Sylvia sketch noted the post. Now nobody's ever used it because frankly, it's not that good, but I enjoy that because it's almost like I was able to catch lightning in a bottle before the storm really came, right? So I think that's number one. That's cool. Number two, when I was doing my master's degree, I depended on a lot of people's work in order to write about my idea and how I would do things as a counselor. And so I had the best of both worlds, and most people do. Most people read about a topic that's interesting to them, and they take from the masters or the people that are fluent in that area, and then they take it and they twist it into something that will allow them to be fluent. You see, I want to say that whenever I start something new, I will look to others as models, as exemplars, to get me started. So I know this is what I do most of the time, not all the time. But in my toolkit, sometimes it's like, oh, I want a podcast, so I'm going to talk to Brian Briggs, and I'm going to talk to some other people, and I'm going to get a feel for how they run their show. And then either I will try to mimic that to get me started, or something from that ignites something in me, and then I build off of it. So I want to go back and I want to take away what I said about sometimes I do this, sometimes I do that. I want to refer now to a toolbox, in that I've got a toolbox, and in that box there's different ways, there are different tools I can use to approach something. One of the tools is to look to somebody who's already doing it and observe their process over a period of time so that I can get a feel for how they do things and then mimic it to get me started. Sometimes I use that tool. Sometimes I use the tool that says, just do your thing. Just do it. And with that tool comes another tool called time, which gives me permission to spend a lot of time on something to see if I can craft it without having to look to exemplars. So depending on my mood, depending on the circumstances, I look in the box and I pick the right tool for the job. Sometimes even with those tools, I don't know which one to pick. It's really interesting, actually, now that I think about it. Sometimes I'll look at my toolbox, I'll look at my tools, and I'll be like, I don't even know which one to start with. I'm in no mood. Like, I'm not being dragged in one way or the other. I don't know what to do. But the bottom line, the end of the day, is execution. Whether you're grabbing information from others, whether you're just doing something new and creative, I think you have to just go. Even if sometimes, like I was saying, I don't like the tool, but I grab it anyway, because I know that if I don't do anything, there will be no action. And no action is worse than action that's uncomfortable, in a way, right?
Yeah. I want to bring it back. You got me thinking about my question, like, is sketchnoting still a thing? Here's my next level part to that. Is it still a thing like it was a thing 3 or 4 years ago? Now, here's my next level to that. What has it become? You know what I mean? We have this kind of interesting opportunity sometimes, and maybe this is only interesting to me, to actually observe within a fairly tight timeline the evolution of a tool. And sketchnoting in itself is a tool not only that's used as a creative outlet, but there was something about it hitting the EDU market that really inspired people. It's kind of like visual note taking has been around for a lot longer than I think sketchnoting. Sketchnoting, I think, was it Mike Rhodes? He's one of the biggies that kind of has a book. Sylvia, obviously, there's other individuals that are kind of promoting it as a as a thing. That idea of putting together ideas, letter text, images, and kind of like process indicators, right? So all these kind of like little bits that go into the salad, and then you have something that kind of represents your understanding. Could be an art piece unto itself, I guess. It becomes a story. It becomes something that's codified that maybe only you and a small group of people might actually understand, almost like propaganda to a degree, right? That you're marketing an idea. So I just wonder, within a very tight, let's say within 5 years, we have this burn really hot, intense moment of sketchnoting, and it just makes me wonder about the 2.0 of it. So what has it evolved to? You know, is it because you don't see as many posts about the wow factor of starting sketchnoting. You still see every once in a while, you know, somebody's offering a presentation or it comes up at a PD session. Do you think that this is something that has a 2.0? Do you think it's something that it was just kind of like, I almost say like a flash in the EDU pan, as in where it's kind of like it's past now? For me, it's important. Like I find myself, I want, what it comes down to is when I talk about my own creative processes, can I make the thing outside, can I make something on the outside look like what it is on the inside? So even our conversations on the Saturdays, and I put together a few icons, these are the things that kind of pop up right away when we start to talk. But it gets me wondering, like, is sketchnoting, has it passed out of popularity?
I think it's more normal now than it was before. And I'm going to argue that many people have been sketchnoting like forever. It's not what happened is that someone took it to a whole other level. Now, I'm not familiar. I'm biased. I'm on the Sylvia Duckworth train for a number of different reasons. So I don't know other people who sketchnote. I see sometimes they're referred to, like, I'm going to such and such a sketchnoting
session
workshop at 2 p.m. today. And I'm like, oh, it's not Sylvia? I just move on because that's my bias. But before it was popular, man, people call them doodles. People were doodling on their papers and in their books forever. Mm-hmm. So it's someone brought it to the forefront. Someone said, hey, have you thought about taking all these different colors and these really cool pens and this cool paper and then doing this? And then guess what? Now we've got this thing called Twitter and Instagram and Facebook where we can share with the world our stuff. And then they start sharing it and saying, look at how I basically broke down this person's concept. And so again, it's something people have been doing forever. And then somebody took it and brought it to the forefront in a really kind of cool packaging. And don't get me wrong. In this situation, what I'm talking about, I'm not trying to take anything away from anybody who sketch notes or people who have written books about it and it's their bread and butter. I'm not. I'm just saying that it kind of connects to what I was talking about earlier, in that what's becoming popular is people taking the normal and then making it abnormal by the way we're sharing it out and the tools we have today. That's what's happening. So that's the way I see it.
Now, are you addressing the packaging or the idea?
I guess I'm addressing the packaging,
okay,
but also the idea in a way, because when people bring that idea back to awareness, it's fresh because it's all floating in our head. I wish I had a really good example. People will tweet something out like, somebody tweeted, oh, this is my big thing for the summer, failure. Failure is now the cool thing to talk about. It's been for the past like 6 months, but I'm just talking about it now with you. Failure. Oh my God, nobody ever succeeds without it. But now people, the edu celebrities are like, oh, failure is necessary. Don't forget to fail forward. Everybody's been doing that since the beginning of time.
Right.
But because so-and-so tweets about it, it's now, going to get 10,000 retweets and 50,000 favorites, likes, or whatever. And it's like, it's a little bit annoying. Maybe because I didn't say it first, but nobody's listening to me anyway. It's stuff like that. It's like you take the idea of failure and people are milking it huge. They're like packaging it. People are sketchnoting about it, and people are writing books about it, and it's just being repackaged, and people are eating it up. So why are people eating it up? What is it about it that people like? And I'm not slighting anybody, because I'm enjoying some of this stuff too. You know, it doesn't have to be the topic of failure. It can be other topics, and I'm milking it. I'm taking it too. I'm enjoying it. Maybe because the packaging these days is more attractive, right? I don't know. Maybe it's the messenger who's attractive, and they have a way with words, and there's something about them that's magnetic, and it just attracts you in, right? There's different layers of why people go after certain things. But the sketchnoting thing, I think, like, I know people who I'm going to call doodling. I know people who have doodled staff meetings, and I look at their doodles and I'm like, oh my God, I've learned more from your doodle than I have sitting here for 2 hours listening to this staff meeting. Because there's a way that they have taken the ideas in the meeting and the discussion, and then the way that they've created something that resonates with me, that hits my brain right in the right spot and feels so good and makes me think, oh, I get that. I get it. I like that. It works for me. I mean, so...
Are you a sketchnoter?
Hell no.
Yeah, you've never, eh?
I doodle, but it's all the same stuff. It's little circles and triangles. It's like geometric shapes. So maybe that's the thing for me. I'm a math doodler. And now I can put it out there, and I can make connections to the numeracy things that I've learned about over the years, and I can write a book. And then people are going to start math doodling.
I can remember. This might no, it's true, but let me extend it and put it into, like, here's the decoded part of it. Having a conversation with, and I haven't dropped her handle in a while, but Pam, my CYW that I worked with last year. So she anyone wants to connect with her, at Pam Sheena on Twitter, definitely a worthwhile follow to check in with and see what she's working on. We had a laugh one time when we were talking about, well, what other kind of noting can you do? So we were talking about, like, cook noting or dance noting, or what was the other one? She said sing noting. Can you imagine someone that during a staff meeting or a professional session, they're doing interpretive dance as the person's talking? And somebody at the back, it comes to mind. Do you remember that? What was that? What's the two different videos that pop up? It was a Fatboy Slim. What was that? Rockefeller Skank video. And isn't it just the music and someone, like, dancing, crazy dancing out front of some theater? Or that other, there's footage somewhere else of, needing to be the first. All it takes is to be that first person. And it's at some sort of a festival, and you see some dude I don't know who. I think it was a dude stand up, and he just starts sort of, dancing, and then somebody else comes dancing, and like the whole crowd is dancing. You just need to be that first person. So here's the challenge. You know what? I'm going to put the challenge out to Rodenizer, because he was so forthcoming. He was so forthcoming with trying out that mobile administrator cart, whatever it was, in season 1. Put the challenge out to him to come up with a different type of noting. Song noting. I like dance noting. Dance noting is pretty good. Mime.
The staff's going to hate him.
Mime noting. What else could you do? Cooking noting would be good.
That would be awesome. Imagine walking into a staff meeting, and your principal's about to start, and you've got this, like, little table to yourself, and you've got all these ingredients in front of you.
Lego noting. Okay. Clay. No, what's that called? What do you call it?
Plasticine?
Yeah, plasticine, or what's the other stuff that
I know a guy that did that, eh?
What?
We were at, okay, so this is a bit of a no-no in my circles, like in the Catholic education circles. Maybe I thought it was a no-no at the time, but now I'm thinking it's not so much. We were at a mass, and it was a really big mass where we had I don't know if it was the whole system. Maybe it wasn't the whole system. We wouldn't have been able to fit in this one place. We were at this one venue, and I think maybe it was a family of schools. And so there was probably like, there was the high school, and then there was like the 5 or 6 feeder schools. And there's this dude, he's artistic, and he's well known for his, like, he's a classroom teacher, but his gift is visual arts. And so that's what he brings to his students. And we were in the middle of a mass, and he was sitting a couple people over from me. And the people on one side, we were like, look at this guy, man. Like, he's not even listening. He had plasticine, and he was literally like creating as the mass was happening, which is a no-no. I mean, like, by societal norms. Well, okay. By societal norms.
Okay, yeah.
They look at you, you're like, you're in church and you're playing with plasticine. The kids are allowed to do that, but not the adults. But anyway, long story short, by the end of it, see, I had paid some attention to his process, because I was like, what is he doing? But then at the end, he had created this intricate sculpture, and it represented what was happening at the mass. And so if you take a step away from tradition for a minute.
You've got to step way back for a sec.
Take a step away from tradition. Don't stereotype him for just a minute. Don't ostracize him for just a minute, and listen to him with an open heart, open ears, eyes wide open. And I did. I engaged him, and I amused it for a few minutes. And you know what? I left thinking he had something. He was listening the whole time. He just wasn't sitting straight up looking at the person presiding over the mass. He was looking down, and he was working away at this thing. And it was beautiful. It was very abstract, but when he started to talk about it, he's like, well, this represents this. And then when so-and-so was talking about that, I decided I was going to do this. And he even, in the middle of it, he pulled out like a pen, and he started using the pen to like do intricate design, and to like, just as a tool to create what he was seeing in his mind, depending on what was happening in the situation that he was in. And at the end of it, I thought, what's killing this guy is his bad reputation. He has a bad reputation for not paying attention, for being a bit of a maverick. If he didn't have any of that, people would be looking at him and saying, this man's a genius. Look at what he did. Look at how he represented his understanding and his learning during this mass, which breaks my heart, right? Because within every person is that genius, and what gets stripped away, that genius gets stripped away because of the context of what you're known for, of how people have boxed you. And so I just think to myself, yeah, we'll throw it out to D-Rod and we'll see what he does with it. And his staff's probably going to be upset, but dude, I'm still stuck on the cook note. I would love to prepare some type of dessert while somebody's talking about whatever.
It's funny because it brings to mind scarcity of resources. Like, you can show up, this, having these right in front of me, like all this and a handful of markers. Like, this is really safe. This is really safe exposition of my understanding. This is what, like you said, outside societal norm. There is something about, like, I'm more than happy. You call me out like Clough. I'd love you to look up at the camera every once in a while. Like, you're not tracking the ball of the conversation, but I think there is flow here, and then putting stuff down on paper. It's like it seems purposeful. And I think, if I go back to that, observing other people's creativity and stealing their fire, like if that's what you're doing singularly, then at some point, my hope is that you could sort of push through and become your own kind of creative force, whatever that is, that thing where you feel like you can just kind of lock it in and produce. If that dude is doing Play-Doh or plasticine sculptures, that is such a out of the box, out of the ordinary, and definitely forbidden social norms, religious protocol norms. Like, that's just, I get it. I've been there. But then, like you said, you step back a little bit and you start to recognize that the actual cost benefit, there's so much more benefit to it. Because as you said, if someone's able to then look at what they've produced and connect it to the bigger picture, like that's phenomenal. And if you're going to do to the cooking thing, it comes down to scarcity of resources and out of the box thinking. That would take a lot of prototyping, I think, before it's already done in a lot of places. I used to do that. I used to do that in the classroom. We would sort of, I'd say, okay, I would bring in some of the fresh herbs from the season, and I would say to my students, okay, what is it that we can't do with this? Or what is it that we shouldn't do with this? And I would have a whole bunch of kids say stuff, and I would grab the really easy ones. I would have some kids say, well, you'll only use that in pasta sauce. You should only eat it there. And then I would grab a handful and eat it. And I would ask them, what are you thinking right now as I'm basically busting your brain? I'm doing a thing that you've been told you shouldn't do. And I had some kids say, I would never, ever do that. And I have some kids come up and go, oh, you can actually eat that? You can actually do that? And I love that. That's that kind of a iconoclasm that you're doing. Like, you can actually break this rule and learn something from it. I wonder what permissions this guy you talked about opened up for others, if not within that sort of like ceremonial process, but somebody else looking at it and saying, wow, he just did he created something in a space where I never thought creativity actually existed. And so important. I think that's more valuable. And part of it is not, I think it's important that this dude did this, but to the bigger picture, the reminding people that creativity can be in spaces all the time. It doesn't necessarily mean that a bunch of people are walking into service in the next week with Play-Doh and a lap desk to start doing creative stuff, but it opens them up to that possibility. So they're not going to replicate the experience, but as you said, they're going to take it as light their fuse to go and do something in a different space. I really like that example. I really, really like that example. And cooking's a wonderful one because people there's scarcity of resources, but I think people, how they learn about what they eat is complex enough. It keeps that conversation pretty vivid. Like, you can do some pretty cool stuff. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that talking about this right now and talking about that experience and that individual creating while listening, even though it maybe didn't look like he was listening, you hit me with, I'm now hit with an idea, not really an idea. First week of school's coming up next week. I'm going to address this with my students. I'm going to talk to my students. I'm going to tell them about my bias as their teacher, how if they're sitting on the carpet, or whether they're sitting on the carpet or not, whether they're looking at me or not, there are some non-negotiables there. I need to know that you're somehow picking up what I'm putting down or what somebody else is putting down, right? So when I'm not the sage on the stage, when I'm like the guide on the side, but there's good learning happening, how are you picking up that learning? Are you even aware of how you pick up that learning? They probably won't be in grade 2 and 3, but I'm going to work on this because I do believe that people can absorb information, people can participate in a way that does not appear that to look like they are participating. And I need to be open to that because I don't want to be, and I have been that teacher that said, hey, why aren't you sitting with us? Why aren't you looking at the speaker? I think about that now and it upsets me a little bit, brings me a little bit of sadness because I know in a staff meeting, sometimes I need to get up and walk around. And as I'm walking around, it doesn't mean I'm not listening. It just means I needed to get up and move in order for me to continue to absorb what is happening at that moment in time. I've gotten up and walked over to the food table to grab something to eat because I needed a stimulus. I needed something to change here so that I could keep functioning. Now that's huge in primary, right? Because they're working on self-regulation, and as we know, some of our students have needs that get in the way of their learning. But it just brings to my attention, to my awareness, it's important to be flexible, because I know some students need a fidget. Other students, they have a fidget in their hand and they have no idea what just happened over the past 5 minutes. That's a problem, right? Then it's a distraction, and then that's not good for your learning. And so this discussion needs to be had, but I'm ultra sensitive now to this idea that how people digest information and what it looks like when they're processing it can be very different. And it doesn't fit with the standard, everybody sitting on the carpet with me and I'm talking and you're all looking at me. It doesn't have to be that way. But I think that it's important that if somebody doesn't operate that way, then they need to advocate for themselves. But that comes with relationships. So as I get to know my students, I will know that if so-and-so's in a corner doing whatever, stretching, they're still part of the learning process. It just looks different for them. And I know that when so-and-so is sitting at their desk with a pencil and a paper, I know that that's not working. They have no idea what's happening at the carpet where the so-called instruction is happening. And then I need to deal with that too. So thanks for helping me bring that up. See, what I just said there is not new. What I just said there is not original. What's happened is something you've said has made me ultra aware of that. And now that it's at the forefront, I'm tweeting about it just because I want to get it out there. If somebody wants to discuss, I would love that engagement, but that probably won't happen. But I'm putting it out there anyway. But it's not an original idea. It's just that it's an awareness. It's something that I'd like to pride myself on as a classroom teacher, to be able to give the kids what they need to process. But there's an accountability, right? So when I sit down in conference with you and we talk about a concept, if you're completely lost, then maybe what you were doing at that time was not the right thing to do. And I'm your teacher for the year. I'm your guide for the year. So I'm going to try to guide you, and I'm going to try to lead you to understand a little bit more about yourself and what you can do to become a better learner.
You got me thinking about Seinfeld for some reason. That whole thing that made his show so popular is that it was just observing the normal, but with a fresh perspective. And I think that can help sort of create some change, I guess. And I guess that in itself is creativity, because if other people revisit an idea because of something that you've sparked in them, that's a creative process too. It's a very much in the moment kind of a creative process. But yeah, the whole, Seinfelding education in some ways, like putting things back out there again, because I guess what I like, if I think about this concept, if you have an aha moment, if you really have an aha moment about something that has occurred, I think whatever you post out because of that will have a different tone and flavor to it, as opposed to a post or a piece or something's produced that you feel obligation to do it because of a brand or because of your position somewhere or because your publisher is sort of suggesting it. Because you can kind of read that in two different ways, especially I think in social media. I think this is also what some of the people that you've introduced me to that say some kind of extreme hardline things, there's something authentic about how they say it, about motivation and going for what you want. And, it's got to have some grind and some suffering. I think that there is an element I can feel when the posts are coming from an authentic place. Now, again, that could be marketing that I'm just falling into. Could be. But I do think when it comes back to, looking at things that are happening in our digital spheres and saying, is this what's happening in education? I feel like, before I finish that sentence, if something's cooked for you in the microwave versus something on the stovetop, can you taste the difference?
I want to say yes.
I can too.
I want to say yes.
Yeah. So it's, let's say soup that's warmed up, soup that's been warmed up in a pot versus nuked. There's elements about it's still soup. Still soup. There's soup for you in front of you.
Seinfeld.
I know. There you go, man. So that's where but there is a noticeable palate difference. There's a texture difference. Get into other things like breads or meats, it's even more profound. This is where I look at some of the ideas that could be shaped or shared within EDU. Is that does it have a different sort of tone and taste to it? Does it feel like it's been quickly produced and pushed out, or was some time taken to kind of craft it, or a story behind it? And that's where, you know, some of these things that we've talked about, even saying something like, you know, is sketch noting still a thing? Is, have I noticed anybody doing anything kind of new with it? Is there some new life or new perspective, or some, you know, I never thought about it this way? Even if someone said, I've never done sketchnoting before in my classroom, I decided to try it this year and it was horrible. That's a new idea. It's a fresh perspective on something. And then they kind of, you know, you can sort of reach out and have the question, well, how didn't it work? Where were the, you know, you can get to the observations of it. But the carte blanche that somehow sharing something that's, let's say, harshing on sketchnoting, any tool or strategy, as in that is the actual tone of education right now, that's where it starts to become kind of problematic, because it's not for everybody. Neither is sketch dancing, sketch cooking, sketch claymation. How about sketch tweeting? What would that be? I guess that's Periscope. You could even say.
Well, and people do it all the time, but we use it as a back channel.
Yeah. What if it's the front channel?
Yeah. What if it's the front channel?
Can you imagine a religious ceremony where the Twitter feed is up front too? Talk about the trust. I'm just pointing out, right? Like, you know, that was an amazing sermon that you gave, or wow, I'm having these really deep thoughts, and it's just like it's being like we do in a classroom.
Well, wouldn't it be even cooler if the sermon was happening and the person presiding could read the tweets and adjust the sermon as they go? Like, what if, you know, somebody's
adjust or address, right?
Well, you're going through it and you're talking about a particular concept, and then someone hits you with, I don't get it, I need more. I don't get this particular area. And then as you're talking, it's being retweeted and liked. And so then you can see that there are 200 people in front of you, and now this one tweet's gotten like 15 hits, right? You're like, oh God, literally and figuratively. My people don't know what I'm talking about. Okay, let's back up the truck and say, okay, well, let's go deeper into this for the next 2 minutes, and then I'm done. And that's your sermon. I mean, it's a little bit on the fly, right? It's like it takes away from your preparation. But if you're fluent, it reminds me of Gary V. Gary Vaynerchuk does lots of speaking engagements, and his best ones are the ones where he talks for like 10 minutes about his backstory and then says, okay, it's Q&A time. For the next hour, it's just Q&A, because I know none of you want to hear me talk about blah, blah, blah. You can find it on YouTube. But some of you might have particular questions about your particular context. I'm here. I'm ready. Let's do it. And then that when he does that, I know some people don't like that because they're like, he's just not prepared. My response to that is, no, he's ultra prepared. He's going to lean on his experience. He's going to lean on things he's learned. He's going to lean on having to think quickly about a particular idea and then provide an answer about it, whether he's talked about that 100 times or not. And he's going to give value back to people who are there to see him. Because, I mean, it shows a fluency, it shows a fluidity there. That sometimes when you craft a really nice talk, you may not have much fluidity or fluency. You've just had the time to craft something and then present it. But can you speak to it? Can you play with your ideas in a way that other people are like messing around with them? Can you deal with that? I think there's power to that. And I know it's important for a presider to give the message that goes along with the readings of the day and things of that nature. But wow, think of like how powerful it would be if there's a monitor there and you could see the back channel right up at the front as a front channel, and people saying, like, even just an indication of where people are at in the middle of a presentation. I think. And I think we need to, again, there has to be trust, right? Like at my staff meeting the other day, my principal said something about, when we're here, we're present at the meetings and like we're not on our phones. And I agree with him in that, yeah, we shouldn't be, on Amazon.ca ordering stuff for the house while we're in the staff meeting. But I disagree with something you might say might trigger me in a really positive way that then I want to share out in that moment with my digital PLN. And I think that in today's day and age, that's a positive thing, not a negative thing. And so, I agree on the one hand, yeah, if you're texting your buddy about the hockey game tonight, that's not appropriate at that time. But if you're leveraging the learning and you're sharing the learning and other people are benefiting in real time or it's being archived for another time, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think people do that with pencil and paper all the time. The new pencil and paper is the cell phone, the mobile device. So why can't I be on it? I think that's about trust, right? So if I talk to my principal about this and say, listen, sometimes you're going to say something and I like to take that information. I like to do something with it digitally. So like, don't take offense. And if he really doesn't like it, then he's going to tell me, no, I really can't deal with that. Okay. But I mean, I should present it to him and say, listen, just because I'm on my mobile device doesn't mean I'm causing problems. Just like if I had a Chromebook in front of me, you're like, go to this document and check this out. I can still be on Amazon.ca on the next tab. So it's like, can we get over what is in front of me and how I'm using it? Because I'm telling you how I'm going to use it. So it was interesting to me. It was interesting to me. No doubt there's appropriate use and inappropriate use of any kind of technology in any kind of meeting with other people. But I think when you put it out there, then they know. And I think communication is key. If I have a sick kid at home and I'm about to go into a staff meeting, maybe I need to go to the principal and say, listen, I'm going to be back and forth. My kid's vomiting like crazy. I may have to leave. I'm going to try to stay. But the only way I can stay is if I'm in communication with what's happening somewhere else.
Yeah.
And now they might say, well, what would you have done 10 years ago? I would have left because I would have gotten a phone call. Boom, I'm out. Yeah. So you can have me here participating, at 75%, or you can have me out of here participating at 0%. And to their credit, they might say, go home.
Yeah.
No, don't be here. Don't distract yourself here. Go home. You're needed there. But some won't say that. And I've had both types of administrators. Some will say, okay, sit down. I really don't like it, but sit down.
Right.
And then I wonder what's wrong with this person? What has them so agitated? What have they experienced that our relationship is not solid enough that they're bothered?
Mm-hmm.
Listen, Chris, unless you have something pressing to say on that note,
no.
I want to say that it's been a good episode 1, season 2, also known as episode 48. We didn't talk once about our startup for next week, which I think is either because we're traumatized or because there are more pressing things to talk about. We don't need to rehash how we start school every year when the new season and new episode starts up.
I'll add something to it. It could just be that we need to be in the week. We need to be in the week. We've sort of, I think, between the binary code vids and just the catalog so far, I think there's a trackable path. So I'm okay that we didn't speak to it directly because some of the conversation exists in other places. I think it'll be the conversation that happens next Saturday or Sunday where we're kind of like bursting out of the week, like where the things have now happened, the ideas have been put into the classroom, the reality, we've lived it. So we have some lived experience to speak to it. I think that's one thing that, with this podcast, we've come back to again and again is that a very strong starting point is the lived experience. we haven't done Tuesday yet. As soon as we do, I'm sure we're gonna be thinking about this is something that we need to talk about. So
sounds good.
Yeah,
and for anybody who's listening, we have been going back and forth about our school startup. It's on our YouTube page. So if you go to YouTube, it's the DeCodEd podcast. And then when you get to the videos, there are two playlists. One's called the DeCodEd podcast, which is kind of what we're doing here, and then the other one's called Binary Code. And Binary Code are short videos that Chris and I have been putting together for maybe the past week and a half around our process starting up in our new schools, in our new classrooms, and just there's that twist to it, but there's also just the general startup. This is what it looks like to move into a classroom. This is what it looks like midweek when your brain stopped working and you're like, I don't know what more to do. I hit that point, but I didn't really vlog about it. But Chris, I hit that point where I was at school and I was under the gun because my wife and I had a lunch date, and it was really cool. I can remember the moment where I just relaxed. The principal came onto the PA system and said, FYI, grade 1 and 2 teachers, we're making some changes to the class lists. I just wanted to put it out there. And as soon as he said that, I felt this calm come over me, like there's nothing more I can do. Because everything I've done is based on knowing what to expect on Tuesday. And the boss just said things are changing again. Well, if things are constantly changing and will be over the next week, then there are certain things that I just need to let go of. There are certain things that will remain incomplete until I'm told this is your class. And so I moved on from there. I'm ready for Tuesday. I'm ready. I have some plans and I have some backup plans. Wednesday will be a different story, but I need to go into Tuesday. I need to start Tuesday. That's it. There's nothing more I can do. Even though I want to do more, there's not. And so I'm done. I hit that point.
Me as well. You said it perfectly. Stuff is changing right up, and everything will change up into the moment that group of kids walks in my classroom. And let's see what happens.
Do you have a visual for us to end us off?
I do.
Can we see it, or is it not ready for public eyes? Oh, so you did go with the season 2, episode 1.
There we go.
Thanks, buddy.
You're welcome, man. All right. Chat you soon. Have a fantastic week.
You too.
We'll connect again soon.
Yeah. Take care.